chaotic situation unfolding right now down in Haiti, where current Prime Minister Ariel Henry has said he will resign once a transitional council is in place. This comes in the wake of a variety of paramilitary organizations or gangs forming an alliance to try to overrun the state government. We wanted to dig into whatever the heck is happening here, and we're lucky to have an expert on Haiti joining us at the table. Jake Johnston is the author of Aid State, and he is also a senior research associate at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Welcome, Jake. Great to have you.
Good to see you, man.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, start with, is what I just said there accurate? How would you describe what's happening and unfolding on the ground in Haiti?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, that's right. I mean, we had this announcement last night, and I think one key piece of this also is that announcement followed a separate announcement coming out of Kingston from the CARICOM community, the leaders of the Caribbean nations. Secretary of State Blinken was there as well. The Prime Minister of Canada also participated, a number of other foreign powers, announcing support for a new transitional council, presidential council of 7 members to take over the government and name a new prime minister. And so that directly preceded Henry's pre-recorded message last night, sort of announcing his intention to eventually resign.
So why don't you take us back to some of the roots of this? I'm not even particularly familiar. We covered previously some of the collapse, but it feels like there's been full-scale societal breakdown. So what are at the roots of this most recent iteration of that, and what do you get into in the book?
Yeah, sure. So I think, there's a few things to understand about this very proximate causes of what happened. I mean, so one, there was an announcement about 2 weeks ago from these same actors that are now announcing a new government that Henry would hold an election in August 2025, so well out into the future. This is a leader who has come under criticism for his lack of legitimacy, right, consolidating all the power under him over the last 2+ years in office in Haiti. And so that was obviously met with quite a bit of concern in Haiti,
Sure.
right? And it was the next morning that you really saw these coordinated attacks against government institutions begin across the capital. Taking a step back, right, and going into some of these deeper causes, right? Because this has not happened, this is not a week old, it's not 2 weeks old, it's not 2 years old, right? I mean, in many ways, this is 200 years old. Right. Haiti was born of a successful slave revolt, right? The first country to abolish slavery in its constitution. And in many ways, it has paid for that ever since, right? And at the root of so much of the conflict, one, this history of foreign intervention, and two, a broken social contract where you have a state that has not represented or been held accountable by the people itself, but really more so from external actors, which again gets into that history of foreign intervention.
Interesting.
Can you talk about who these gangs are? What are their roots? What do they want? And what's the role that they're playing in this crisis?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack here, right? And things are moving quickly. And I think there's also another issue, which is, what people say, as we know, is not always what their real motivations are, right?
Sure.
So the big change that we saw over the last couple of weeks was that these disparate armed groups that, again, have been involved in different sorts of criminal activities, kidnapping, rape, extortion, things like this for many years, but of course all have different motivations, different interests, different connections to communities and things like this, have joined forces together, right, in this effort to oust Henry. But what their ultimate end goal in all of this is, I think, remains a bit to be seen. They have been seemingly allied with an individual who is seeking to claim political power and become president, an individual, Guy Philippe. He is a former police officer who was very involved in the 2004 coup of the democratically elected Jean-Bertrand Aristide. He was, in 2017, he was arrested in Haiti and actually extradited to the US and spent the last 6+ years in jail on money laundering related to drug trafficking charges. And he was actually just deported back to Haiti by the US administration in November of 2023. And there does appear to be at least some coordination between his political ambitions and the actions we're seeing from armed groups in the streets.
Oh, interesting. So relate back to, you were talking about foreign intervention. Your book is called Aid State. Just give us some, maybe even more context as you're talking there about intervention, about some of the failures of aid. As you said, this is bipartisan. It goes back a long way for people who aren't as familiar, maybe.
Yeah, so of course, I mean, I talked some about the history, right? And so we can talk about the US occupation and French colonialism, but we don't need to go that far back to understand the foreign intervention, right? I mentioned the 2004 coup. In 2010, this was right after the earthquake, right? And this is what I think a lot of US audience sort of remembers about Haiti was this big earthquake and billions of dollars being pledged in a very high-profile effort, right? Former President Clinton was awfully involved. Secretary of State Clinton was involved at the time as well. So $10 billion, but there was an electoral process right after that earthquake as well. And the international community, the US, the OAS, and other players directly intervened and overturned the results of that election, ushering into power Michel Martelly. And him and his political allies have basically been governing the country with the backing of the international community for the last 15 years, right? And so when we look at the situation today, that dynamic is at the cause of so much of this, right? Is that these governments that have been elected in very low turnout votes with questionable legitimacy, with possible criminal ties and alleged things of this nature and that, have received this international support so consistently for so long, it really made a Haitian solution, right? Haitians coming together to build something different, to build something that could actually be sustainable, next to impossible, right? And I think one of the really concerning things right now is with Henri, right? He was blocked from returning to the country about a week ago. He tried to return, he was not able to. He's been basically quiet and holed up in Puerto Rico for the last week. Nobody heard from him until last night. But in that vacuum, in that absence, right, it was international actors who have sort of facilitated this political negotiation. But the optics of what happened, right, it looked almost as if Haitian coalitions were submitting their applications to the international community to be accepted, right? And this dynamic of foreign actors providing legitimacy for Haitian governments is, again, at the root cause of so many of the issues we've seen, right? And so this announcement in and of itself is certainly not a solution to the situation in Haiti, right? It is a potential first step, but far from a resolution of the crisis.
Part of what you lay out in your book, and you actually start with this, is this comparison between the quote-unquote nation building we did in Afghanistan alongside this quote-unquote less heralded and less visible quote-unquote nation building that we were doing in Haiti. Obviously, both were complete and utter failures. One of the things that you point out is the fact that, aid, international aid, which sounds great and okay, you want to go in and it's humanitarian and Bill Clinton's going to be there and he's going to help you all. But over time, the way that aid has been deployed has been in the service of our interests and not in the service of Haitian interests, and has actually undercut the ability of the Haitian government itself to fulfill that basic social contract. So what can we say about this project of nation building in Haiti as we watch what's unfolding now?
Yeah, I think the most simple thing is you can't impose a democracy. You can't impose a state from external sources, right? I mean, it's just not going to work. You might buy a little time, you might have these periods of stability, but in the long run, it is going to blow back, right? It is going to blow up. And that is, I think, what we're seeing in Haiti. I think it's what we've seen in other nations where this has been tried as well. We're looking at foreign assistance in general, right? And it's not all humanitarian, right? There are big money going to development projects and things like this. One thing to understand, right, is these aren't your sort of mom and pop NGOs, church groups that we sort of think of when we think of humanitarianism, right? The biggest players who receive US foreign assistance money are for-profit corporations. Okay, we've designed a system that delivers aid, right, to developing countries and others. But as you said, at its core are US interests, right? And so for Congress, who doesn't really like to appropriate money for foreign aid in general, if they are going to justify it, it's what's in it for my district? What's in it for my constituents, right? And so we have created legislation, we've created requirements that force these aid agencies to give money to US corporations to import US things. And okay, you can understand it from a US perspective and US interests, but what is the actual effect of that on the ground, right? It's undermining local markets. It's undermining local organizations. The very organizations whose organization, right, who bring people together is what could actually lead to a sustainable local solution, right? They're undermined by all of this money coming in and going to outside actors, right? And of course, as you mentioned, the government capacity itself. So the Haitian state, right, through these aid policies, and this has taken place over decades, has really been outsourced, right? You've got about 80% of public services, health, education, things like this, handled by private sector actors, NGOs, funded by development banks, and things like this. This totally severs the relationship between the population and the state, right? I mean, you can't hold those actors accountable for those services that you're getting.
Makes sense.
And that really distorts the notion of a sovereign democracy itself.
So where do you think things go from here? And do you have a sense of what the Haitian people would actually like to see?
Well, look, I think, I certainly don't mean or intend to speak on behalf of the Haitian people, right?
Sure.
It's obviously up to them. I think there are a few principles that certainly I've heard, which is, openness, transparency, inclusion in a process, right, that involves Haitians sitting around a table and coming together with a solution, right? And I think these foreign imposed and foreign organized solutions directly undermine that. And so we'll see how this plays out, right, and how effective they're able to do to meaningfully improve people's lives. But there is going to be a trust deficit from the very beginning with any government that comes out of an agreement or an imposition from outside actors, right?
Did the paramilitary organizations enjoy any kind of popular support, or they're just seen as violent killers and criminals?
I don't think it's an extremely simple answer, right? I mean, I think to various degrees, some of these actors do have ties, at least in their communities, right? I mean, this has been a context that's been building over years with these groups fighting each other over territory, and you rely on them for protection. For any ability to move, you are relying on these actors. And so there's a certain amount of that built up. I don't think, my impression at least is that anyone in Haiti is looking for armed groups to actually take state power. And I think there's an open question of if they are even after that, right? Like I was mentioning earlier, these political connections, I think, are so key to trying to understand this dynamic. We've seen in Port-au-Prince the last couple of days, things have calmed down a little bit, just a little bit, right? The really intense attacks on government institutions have calmed down. The port control has been reestablished over it and things like this. People are moving out about a little bit more. I think that's obviously related to these political negotiations that are happening, right? Giving some space. Are our people going to get a seat there? Are they not? How are we going to react to this? And I think now today, everyone's waking up. Okay, we've had this announcement from Henri, this new presidential council backed by foreign governments. What is going to be their reaction? We'll see. My guess, right, is that this alone is not enough to convince them to drop their fight.
Got it. Well, it's been very, very insightful, and we'll rely on you again if this comes up. So thank you.
Yeah, and guys, please check out the book. I've been reading it, Aid State. It is fascinating not only to understand, more deeply what is happening in Haiti right now, but is a real window into U.S. influence around the world, I guess is the nicest way I could possibly say that. Jake, great to have you. Thank you.
Good to see you, man. Thanks.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
We'll see you guys later, or this way.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.